What happens when you squeeze an orange? What comes out? Orange juice, because that's what's inside. Well, same thing with us as human beings. What happens when life squeezes you and applies pressure? What comes out is what's inside, which are your thoughts. And if you change your thoughts and change your feelings and change your attitude, then you're not a victim. You're not reacting to all these things that are happening in your life. You are pausing and you are responding.
This is the Home of Healthspan podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life. Ben Azadi, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Home of Healthspan today. And before we get into all the books you've written, all the lives you touched, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I am Ben Azadi, and I'm a lively, professional keynote speaker and New York Times bestselling author of Metabolic Freedom.
And numerous other best-selling books. But yes, Metabolic Freedom is the most recent one, the one we were just discussing before that I read or listened to.
Listen to while you're working out the gym.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some amazing stories from that I want to dig in and double click on. But I think for our listeners who might not be familiar with you yet, I think there's this idea that a lot of people they see on social media or writing the books, if they haven't read them and understand the full story, they think, oh, it's easy for them. Like they've always had that and this isn't for me. I know your personal story is very different from that. Do you mind just giving a little background on how you got into what you're doing today?
Of course, Andrew. Yeah. And that I think my authority doesn't come from the books I've written, the stages I've spoken on, my accolades and all that egotistical stuff. My authority comes from pain to purpose. And I could relate to a lot of people that are unhealthy and obese physically and mentally. That was my life for 20 years. And in 2007, when I was 23 years old, when most people who are 23 years old are graduating school, starting a career, maybe starting a family, that was not my life. I was actually looking for ways to end my life. I was depressed. I was physically obese and mentally obese, inflammation all over my body. Back was going out left and right. I had high blood pressure, prediabetes, erectile dysfunction, and I was just completely lost when it came to nutrition, fitness, and health in general. And like so many people, Andrew, I made an appointment with my doctor because I was not feeling well, and I would explain my symptoms to my doctor. And the question that was never asked was, what are you eating, Ben? Let's discuss your lifestyle, Ben. The question that was asked, at least the doctor was thinking, what can I prescribe for this young man? And he recommended some medication. And I felt like I was too young to go on medication. I didn't want to do that at 23 years old. So I thought the best route was to just give up on myself and take my life. And I explored that. But what stopped me from pursuing that was my mom. And she didn't know I was going through this, but I kept thinking about her. I didn't want to cause that sort of devastation for my mom. I love her. So it forced me to figure things out. And for me, it started with studying self-development and mindset. Dr. Wayne Dyer played a big role in my transformation. Bob Proctor played a big role. And I learned a lot of things from these authors, but the main thing that I learned that was my first step to great change was taking responsibility. I finally took ownership. And when you take ownership and responsibility, you stop being the victim of your history and you start to become the victor of your destiny. And that's exactly what I did. I started to treat my body better. Eat real food. I didn't do keto or fasting or biohacking or these supplements that I do now. I simply just moved my body, ate real food, single ingredient foods. And I went through this incredible transformation where I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds at my highest to 170 pounds at my lowest, 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat at that time, and completely transformed my physical appearance, which was great. But more important than the physical six-pack that I achieved was the mental six-pack, and the suicidal thoughts, the depression, all of that just started to dissipate until it was no longer there. That's what got me into this space of health and nutrition. Of course, there's been a lot of iterations in this space, but that was 17 years ago. I've kept the weight off. I know that I was young when I went through it, but I know it doesn't matter what your age is. Your body's not broken. It's just being interfered with. And if we could identify what that interference is, remove it, your body will heal whether you're 23 or 93. And I'm living proof of that.
Yeah, and you certainly are. And I know so many of the people you've helped are as well, right? You continue to do it not just for yourself, but you amplify that impact. Now, I think as the mastermind behind Keto Camp and these others, I think a lot of listeners might expect that as we go through kind of health protocols, everything, we might start at nutrition, but I'd actually go back to the mindset part, right? One thing that I think maybe got glossed over that people might not have heard is mentally obese. I wasn't just physically obese, I was mentally obese. And when we think about health, you could eat the right stuff, you could move your body, but you need that mindset to truly believe you're a healthy person. I know this is a big part of Metabolic Freedom, but it was also a big part of your own personal journey. And so I think we've heard some on what it looked like, but could you define what mental obesity is, and not just what you did over time, but what you're doing today to kind of maintain that, hey, I'm a healthy individual, I'm a healthy person every day, what that means?
Yeah, it does. And so it's so important. It really is probably 95% of the transformation that we're all looking to achieve. It's an inside out job. And we can make the conscious decision to do keto or fasting or, want to lose the weight, but there's a lot going on subconsciously. And it starts with responsibility, as I mentioned. You can't blame other people, your genetics, your enabling family members, and all the things that I was blaming, and make progress and make transformation. I was 23 years old, and of course I've heard of the word responsibility as a 23-year-old, but I didn't understand that word. And when I was reading Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he would explain the word responsible, and he explained it in a way that made it click, and I'll share it with your audience because I hope they understand the word that I now understand. And that word responsibility, it's your ability to respond to life. And if your ability to respond to life is the victim mindset, it's a poor response, you're going to get poor results. But when you take ownership and your ability to respond to life is improved, you're going to get improved results. So responsibility is your ability to respond to life. And then he would say things like, look, I know that there's challenges in life. I know that there's pressure. There's stressors in life. But the example that Dr. Wayne Dyer gave is what happens when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Well, it's obvious, orange juice, because that's what's inside. Well, same thing with us as human beings. What happens when life squeezes you and applies pressure? What comes out is what's inside, which are your thoughts, your attitude. And if you change your thoughts and change your feelings and change your attitude, then you're not a victim. You're not reacting to all these things that are happening in your life. You are pausing and you are responding. Like Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies your power. And it could be a really short space, but that is the response versus the react. So that's something I think about with everything that happens in my life. And that was the starting point for me that helped me achieve great change.
Yeah, as a student of Stoicism, studied a lot, wrote a book on it, that this whole idea of the only thing we truly ever own, our body, we don't, right? A virus can come in, bacteria. The only thing we ever own, and we have it from birth, is our mindset. And yet we just give it away and kind of rent it back. And I've had that victim mindset. I was having the conversation yesterday, early in my career. I was at McKinsey, I was a consultant, and this person was saying, hey, what did you think of it? I said, look, I don't know if it matters what I thought about it at the time, because I thought it was happening to me. And I didn't take ownership. And there are a lot of people that I respect who are brilliant, who have made beautiful careers there and love it. And I think I had the wrong mindset when I was there and didn't make the most of it. And the me of now would be a different person going through that experience. And whether it's work or our health or our interpersonal relationships, I think one thing you bring up in the book is, hey, I'm a person that's trying to quit smoking versus I'm not a smoker.
Yeah.
And that those two different ways of seeing yourself and telling other people have dramatically different results on the outcome of, do you end up quit smoking or not?
It's exactly, Andrew. It's, how you identify your self-image of yourself plays a huge, huge role. And I go in chapter 10 of Metabolic Freedom. I talk about this book from the 1960s, Psycho-Cybernetics, from Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And he was a world-renowned plastic surgeon. And he called this self-image the greatest physiological discovery of his generation, and even to this day of our generation. And here's how he discovered how this self-image works and how it relates to, let's say, weight loss or just getting healthy. He would work on patients that had these really wicked facial disformities through an accident, maybe a birth defect, but they were very unhappy, they were depressed, and they were very self-conscious, low self-esteem. And they would hire Dr. Maltz to perform plastic surgery because he was one of the best in the world, and he would remove their facial disformities. And he noticed with almost all of the patients, even post-surgery, they were still depressed. They were still self-conscious. They were still unhappy. Some of them would literally look in the mirror and see the facial disfigurement, even though it wasn't there, because they never changed the self-image. Their self-image still identified as that person with the facial disfigurement. It wasn't until he changed their self-image, which is in their subconscious mind, that they were able to improve their lives. It's the same thing with us. If we identify with our diagnosis, if we identify with being an overweight person, we can make a conscious decision to change, and we'll make some progress. And then we'll find a way to sabotage ourselves to match that self-image because we never changed it. So we need to change what's happening at a subconscious level for us to get lasting results.
It's very Vanilla Sky. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I do remember that movie. I saw it a very long time ago. Yes.
It makes a lot of sense. I would like to jump over to the keto side, right? Keto camp and nutrition, and the idea between fasting and keto, and these as tools and how you yourself use them. I mean, is it, hey, I'm always keto, or I cycle through and kind of here's what my day-to-day nutrition profile looks like?
Personally, I don't do continuous ketosis. I'm not a fan of, for most people to be in continuous ketosis. There's always exceptions like epileptic patients, and
which is where I got discovered, right? Like that's how it got created in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The 1920s, exactly, for children with epilepsy, right? And then they created a medication and they forgot about the keto diet. So I don't advocate or teach continuous ketosis. I teach flexing, as you mentioned. So going in and out. So for me personally, 90% of the time, maybe 80% of the time, I'm in a fat burning ketosis, ketogenic state. And then I intentionally get myself out of ketosis to burn sugar to maintain metabolic flexibility, to have that balance, right? But for 93% of Americans, and I use that number because that's what the studies show, that a 2022 study that I referenced in the book showed 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. They're essentially in a keto deficiency. They're stuck burning sugar. And there's really nothing wrong with using sugar/carbohydrates as a fuel source, unless you're always using sugar and glucose and carbohydrates as a fuel source. It's a fast path towards these metabolic diseases. So they really need to enter this fat burning process of ketosis. And the cool thing about keto, and what makes keto different than other diets out there, like a paleo diet or a vegan diet or whatever diet is out there, keto technically is not even a diet. It's a metabolic process. There's nothing new about keto. It's just maybe new to some people or nuanced, but this metabolic process of ketosis has been around even before they discovered it in the 1920s. It's been around for as long as humans have existed, right? Our ancestors all utilized ketosis. How do I know that? Well, they didn't have carbohydrates and food available all the time, Andrew. You know this. So they had to enter ketosis. It was a different fuel source for them. Now we've forgotten how to burn fat. So I view it as a tool. And for 93% of Americans, it's the first tool in the shed that I use for them.
And there are a couple ways, or maybe more, to get into it, right? So I think people might be more familiar with the high fat, almost low carb, no carb, and low protein approach. But fasting is another pathway to get there, right? And so when you're doing it, do you play with both now? And what does that look like?
Yeah, to your point, exactly. There's numerous ways to enter ketosis. The overall goal is to lower insulin. And how you get there could be through, as you mentioned, Andrew, fasting, carbohydrate manipulation by restricting carbs. Even exercising and strength training is another way to lower insulin, getting quality sleep. So there's different avenues to get there. For the most part, the way that I have it outlined in the 30-day plan of Metabolic Freedom is to gradually lower the carbohydrates so we can lower glucose and insulin as we increase healthy fat. So it is more of a higher fat, lower carb approach for the first couple of weeks. After that, we actually manipulate the fats to lower it and bring the protein up. Carbs stay low. So there's different ways to do it. That's the general way that I teach it to people, but there's many ways to do it. As you mentioned, you do a 24-hour fast, you're probably going to enter ketosis. So different avenues, but as long as you lower insulin, you'll unlock ketosis.
And your kind of 90% staying in ketosis, is it based on your macro consumption that is what keeps you in ketosis, or how do you do it?
Yeah, because personally, what I'm doing now, and I've been doing this for about a year, it works really well for me, and I'm feeling really good doing it. Monday through Friday, I do a carnivore diet where I eat just meat. I eat red meat, anything that comes from an animal. No carbs, essentially, just meat, a carnivore diet. Sunday, I don't do carnivore. I don't fast, and I don't do keto. I actually do a very high healthy carb day where I'll bring my carbs up to 300 to 400 grams of carbs on a Sunday, healthy carbs, and I don't fast. And that's kind of what I'm doing as a way to maintain metabolic flexibility. And for me, this approach is working for now until I change it up.
When you say healthy carbs, I mean, can you give some examples just so listeners can understand what that means?
Yeah, single ingredient carbs. So fruit is a single ingredient. So blueberries, that's it. Strawberries, anything that comes from a fruit, single ingredient carbohydrates. Rice, potatoes. I do really well with white rice, not so much brown rice. So I'll have white rice, I'll have fruit, I'll have yuca, I'll have potatoes, either white or sweet potato. So whole food, single ingredient carbohydrates is what I consume.
You do really well with white rice. I think this, for listeners, is part of the importance of at some point trying a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, because it is so personalized. Some people react to legumes and others people don't. Some people react to white rice, not brown rice, and it's all different. And it's not consistent, right? A woman over the course of her cycle, or depending on how much sleep you got, or all these other factors come into play. If you exercise before, what your order of eating is, like so many things come in. So it's a fun thing to play with for anyone interested in that.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good idea. You don't have to get a CGM because you're diabetic. Definitely, if you're diabetic, get a CGM. But if you're not, like, use it as a tool, like you just said, Andrew. And I've used it for many, many months. I have found that like legumes and nightshades spike my blood sugars, right? It doesn't work for me. Even something like coconut whipped cream, organic coconut whipped cream, would jack up my blood sugars to like 165. I would have never thought that. But if I was not wearing the continuous glucose monitor, I wouldn't have seen that. And I would think it would be okay for me. But we're so different. You mentioned there's so many variables, women versus men, sleep, et cetera. So CGM is a fantastic tool.
Yeah. And then you talked to another path to it is intense workout, strength training, cardio. What is your kind of fitness and movement routine? Because when you're losing that much weight, I think people need to be conscious also of not necessarily losing too much lean mass in the process. And so it's not just how you're fueling, it's what you're doing with that body once you fuel it. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. There's, to your point, there's a difference between losing weight and losing fat. We want to lose body fat, not necessarily weight, because a part of that could be muscle, and we don't want to lose muscle. We know muscle is incredibly important for insulin sensitivity, to prevent fractures and keep your bones strong as you age. And also it's called the longevity organ, because it really is going to extend your lifespan, and you're going to have a better quality of life with more muscle mass. So the way that I preserve muscle mass and build lean muscle mass personally, and also for the students that I work with, is to prioritize protein. When I mentioned the first week is high fat, low carb, protein is kind of moderate. We're not really focusing on protein. But once I get the person in ketosis, then it's going to be a higher protein ketogenic approach, where they're going to consume 1 gram of protein per pound of their ideal body weight on most days. So if they weigh 155 pounds, but their goal weight is 130 pounds, I would ask them to aim to get at least 130 grams of protein, ideally from animal-based protein. Now, some people have a difficult time getting that much protein, especially when you practice fasting. So what I suggest to them is to fill in the gaps with essential amino acids. A big fan of essential amino acids, and also creatine supplementation is huge. And then, of course, strength training is huge. Something that I'm personally working on is putting on 10, 15 pounds of muscle in the next year or so. So strength training, creating a stimulus, getting enough protein, and then combining that with sleep and recovery is how you do it.
Yeah. And when you say animal-based proteins, is that including whey and protein shakes to try to top it up, or you're trying to get them to go eat whole animals as much as possible? Because some people can have a hard time just eating that much, depending.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you want it to come from the flesh, like the steak, the burger, the chicken, the eggs. I'm okay with having some supplements and protein shakes as a supplement, that it should supplement the diet. Whey protein is interesting, Andrew, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I used to think many years ago when I used to own my CrossFit gym here in Miami that like whey protein was the best. It's like everybody needs to be on whey protein, trying to lose weight, consume whey protein. And then I started studying insulin, and whey protein is highly insulinogenic. It spikes insulin very rapidly. And for somebody who's already insulin resistant, that might not be a good thing unless you're timing it after a workout, right? So I did a workout this morning. I did a 40-minute strength training workout, about 25, 30 minutes of basketball in my driveway, and then a 20-minute sauna session. And I was pretty depleted. And I knew I had interviews like this one here today. So I had 2 scoops of whey protein, and then I had half a rotisserie chicken. So I intentionally spiked my insulin with the whey protein because I did a strenuous workout. So I'm okay with whey if you're doing it like that. But in general, protein shakes, I'm a big fan of beef protein isolate and collagen protein. It has less of an insulin effect.
I'm similar. I'll do the collagen. I have like my morning potion mix. It's like mushroom tea, amla powder, collagen that I just do as one big shot. With spirulina and stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. To get a baseline, and that I haven't seen an effect on insulin spike, my glucose, anything there. But then when I do protein otherwise, it's always right after a workout. And so typically, because I'll go pretty hard, I'll crash. Like you'll spike during the workout, but then by the time I come home, I'm really crashing. And so it levels me out and doesn't spike it on the back end. I do mix vegan and whey. I had gone, I had Dr. Greger on the show and the How Not to Die whole approach, and I had gone very whole food plant-based and just was having a hard time getting all the protein I needed without stomach issues. And so now I mix some more animal-based proteins with it, do eggs, things like that.
Yeah, everybody has the unique approach, right? You got to find what works for you.
And it changes over time, right? Like I was very much on the Tim Ferriss slow carb, very close to ketosis, the 7 days and the 7th day cheat day mix, which wasn't always healthy carbs like you're doing. But I've tried a few different things there.
I remember that book, 4 Hour Body. I read that back in the day. It was a great book. Yeah.
Something that's come up a few times already is sleep. And you had a story in the book that I just think is phenomenal, where this person is trying to lose weight and he's getting up so early every morning to go to the gym and he's seeing no progress. And what you realized was he needed more sleep, right? He was not recovering his body in the right way. And so he couldn't get in line. And what you did was like, hey, you're not allowed to go to the gym for right now. You're going to get more sleep. And you finish the story, kind of talk about what you saw, what you did, and the results.
Yeah. So he was about 70, 80 pounds overweight. He had prediabetes, on his way to full-blown diabetes. He was using a sleep apnea machine every night. And he wanted to lose weight. He wanted to get healthy. So he signed up for a gym membership, and which is great. I'm all for gym memberships. I'm all for working out. However, he was sacrificing a couple hours of quality sleep to wake up in the morning, go to the gym, work out, and then go to work all day and have a stressful day. And then he wasn't recovering from that. It wasn't enough time. So what I told him is, actually right now you need to sleep and recover, and you actually burn fat during deep stages of sleep and REM sleep. Let's stop going to the gym. Instead of shaving off those 2 hours to wake up early and go to the gym, stay in bed. Let's fix the sleep, get quality sleep, get some momentum, and then we'll bring in some of the exercise later on. And before we even brought in the exercise and just making that change, he started to lose weight. 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. And it goes to show you that, exercise is important, but it's not the best strategy for fat loss. You start with the foundations, and sleep is one of those foundations.
Yeah. Sleep, how you fuel. And then it's kind of building the muscle. Oh, that was one thing I did want to come back to on if you're trying to add the muscle. I don't know if you follow Andy Galpin at all, but he had this super simple protocol of, I think the average participant put on more than 8 pounds of muscle over this kind of period. And it's just 2 workouts, an A and a B, and you do them each twice a week. And I did it and kind of put on 6 or 7 pounds of muscle in a relatively short time.
Wow.
And it's just super basic and easy, and you kind of track your weight. So
how long were the workouts?
I added a little stuff to it, but it's less than 60 minutes.
So you do that twice a week?
Yeah, I'll do an A, B, then maybe a swim day in between, and then another A, B.
So pretty much 2 hours of working out each week?
4.
Okay, because A and B. Okay, well, it's not much though. It's not much. So, and how long did it take for you to put on the 8 pounds or so of muscle?
It was just a couple of months because I used to swim a lot. Like I would do a lot of cardio. I was an open water swimmer and all this. And so just cutting back how much cardio I was doing helped me be able to put on more muscle. It was really hard for me.
That's one of my challenges right now, Andrew, is the cardio. Like I love basketball. I play too much because like you mentioned, I'm getting a lot of cardio. I enjoy it. I'll put it at the end of my workouts. I'll play on Sundays with my friends here in Miami. And I think I'm doing too much in terms of like the gains I want for my muscle mass. And it's been a difficult balance for me to get enough strength and gains and also enjoy playing basketball and cardio.
This brings up the next point I wanted to bring up. And I'm so happy you phrased it, right? Because you're playing basketball with your friends. And I think of these trade-offs we have of you could look at the principles of, hey, I want to tick the box on here's exactly how I eat. Here's exactly when I go to bed and wake up. Here's exactly the strength training protocol I have and be super efficient. But what we always say, the fifth pillar of Healthspan, which is this quality, healthy life, is social connection and purpose. And if you do, not to knock him, like he's putting a lot of great stuff out there, like the Brian Johnson approach of every single thing is going to be so perfect, but I have no other humans that I can engage with because I have such a strict schedule. I really have long-term concerns because as humans, you talked about what we were like before we had carbs. I mean, what we were like when we were out in the wild, we had to work together. We weren't going to survive on our own. We are social creatures. And I'm not sure that that trade-off you're making is not the right trade-off of, yeah, maybe I can give up a couple pounds of muscle to go get this beautiful benefit of this social connection. So how do you think about that? I mean, we could talk some about vitamin G and purpose and everything you covered as well.
No, I agree with you. And I commend Brian Johnson for his discipline and his dedication. It's really, really impressive and inspiring in a sense. But yeah, like it's like the social component, it really isolates you from community. And when we think about blue zones, there's a lot of flaws with like these blue zone studies, but what they have in common for sure is that they all have community. And you just mentioned we are social creatures, and that's going to extend lifespan. And I love basketball. It's my favorite sport to watch, my favorite sport to play. It's just like a hobby for me. It doesn't feel like exercise. And I have a hoop in my driveway. It was one of the determining factors of this house. Like, can I have enough room for a hoop? Like the next house I move to, it's going to have enough room for a hoop. That's how important it is for me. And every Sunday, me and my buddies, we go to the park in Miami Beach and we play for a couple of hours, and that camaraderie. So yeah, it feels like the trade-off is worth it. If that's slowing down my gains a little bit, but it's bringing so much quality of life to me, I'll take it, bro. I'm not changing it.
Yeah, I tend to think that is the right answer, personally. And I didn't always, right? I was a very isolated person. Like, wait, I only have this time. I need to get the perfect workout in, and I'm not going to go train with my friends because they'll distract me. And I just realized, one, it's not really a trade-off. I mean, what are you buying these extra hours for, if not for this quality life? And right. the first time, I don't want to invest 18 hours to buy 2, right? Like, think about how you do that. Right. One thing, this is more a personal question, because you bring up A1C. You talked about pre-diabetic and diabetic. And I have had relatively high A1C, even though, I eat whole food, plant-based and everything. I brought it down over time. But speaking to my functional health doctor, he was saying how it's measured is the sugar on the red blood cell. And the healthier you are, the longer that red blood cell is around. So it's typically kind of 90 days, like over 90 days, how much sugar has accrued to this red blood cell. But if you're 10 or 15% more than that, because you're healthy, you have 99 days, you have 100 plus days, it can show as higher because you've had more time to accrue, but it's not an accurate measure on the baseline. What do you see there?
I've seen that too. I've seen healthy individuals have higher A1Cs. Now, that's not to say, if your A1C is over 5.7, like that's an issue, right? That's prediabetes. And then of course, 6.5% or higher is full on diabetes. But let's say it's like, you mentioned yours was a little bit higher than usual. Do you mind sharing the number or? Yeah,
I mean, I think it was at like a 5.6, and then it's since come down maybe 5.3, 5.4.
Okay. So you were like borderline pre-diabetes, but there are other moving parts there. So when I see somebody, and I've seen this before, it's not common by the way, but I've seen it before where somebody's doing keto, fasting, carnivore, they're doing insulin-friendly routine, yet their A1C is still a little high. I would look at fasting insulin as a more important metric than the A1C. In general, a fasting insulin is a more important metric than an A1C, because that's actually showing you what's happening at the pancreas level of actually the beta cells of the pancreas producing that insulin. And we want, if your A1C is 5.6, but your fasting insulin is between 3 and 6, that's not really a concern for me because you're insulin sensitive. And to your point, depending on also where you live, people at elevation like Colorado, Utah, also have different lengths of red blood cells, and you don't get accurate A1C measurements as well. Okay. So that's a fact. I don't know if that's a factor for you.
Yeah, more sea level. Yeah.
Yeah. So me too. So it's not really your factor, but yeah, there's different variables there. That's why we don't put too much emphasis in one marker. And something else you can do is look at postprandial glucose as well, right? You test your blood sugars before you eat a meal. You test it 2 hours after. And if you have a healthy response to that meal, your 2-hour blood sugar marker should be back to baseline or close to baseline. And as long as you're seeing that, even with a higher A1C, as long as you have a fasting insulin that's sensitive and your postprandial glucose looks good, I wouldn't put too much value in that one reading of the A1C.
Okay. I appreciate that then.
Yeah, for sure. But the A1C is a good marker. There's a study that I referenced in the book on diabetics because it showed an A1C of 7.5%, which is full-blown diabetes. But it showed in the study that they estimate if your A1C is at 7.5% or higher, every single year it's at that level, they estimate 100 days come off your lifespan, which means if it's at that level for 15 years, you lose 4 years off your lifespan. That's how destructive high levels of blood sugar are, because there's so many reasons why high glucose levels shortens your lifespan. But one of the main reasons is that it depletes nitric oxide. When glucose goes up and it stays up, nitric oxide plummets. And nitric oxide is a very important gaseous molecule. One of the main roles of nitric oxide is to create vasodilation. It opens up your blood vessels. It allows oxygen and nutrients and blood flow to deliver to tissues and heal tissues. When you deplete it, it creates vasoconstriction. Now your heart has to pump harder, which is what high blood pressure is. And it dramatically increases your risk of heart disease, which is the number one killer in the US and in most countries as well.
Well, and I think maybe even more important, though it's harder to measure, is the impact on your health span over that time, right? You could lose more years of health span and you're suffering that while you're here. And I think that's probably the more critical thing. It's while we're here, we want to be healthy and enjoying.
That's fair. Let me add to that, because it's hard to measure that in a study, but you're absolutely correct. Because the person who has 7.5% A1C or higher, they're taking their medication every day. They're pricking their finger. They have vision loss. They have neuropathy. They have erectile dysfunction. Their quality of life is depleting dramatically, even probably more than the lifespan is. Their health span is depleting dramatically. So I agree with you.
I mean, the chronic inflammation, I mean, these are people that think it's normal, but when they get out of bed, it's painful in the morning, right? Like yes. When they step, when they move, like, oh, this is just what it is, because it happened maybe relatively slowly over time. Yep. But it's not fate. You don't have to feel that way. You can hop out of bed and be like, I'm ready to go.
That's right. The way that we were designed, bro. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Ben, this has been amazing. I have a lot of vitamin G for all your work and the most recent book, Metabolic Freedom. Everybody should give it a read or listen if you're like me with it. Ben narrates it and he's great. We'll certainly put it in the show notes, but so people can hear it, where can people find you, follow you, learn more about Keto Camp, everything you do?
Thank you, Andrew. I'm grateful for you, my friend, and your amazing work and the great conversation we had here. The book is available everywhere: bookstores, Barnes & Noble, Books and Books, Amazon. Most people go there. Support your local bookstores if you have that. It's going to be there. But we have a free course we're giving away to anybody who buys the book at metabolicfreedombook.com. You get a free course on the metabolism. And we also have 4 exclusive interviews in that course with some metabolic health leaders: Dr. Jason Fung, Megan Ramos, Cynthia Thurlow, and Dr. Daniel Pompa. So if you want access to the course, the interviews for free, go to metabolicfreedombook.com. You'll see different retailers to buy the book. You simply just buy the book and then put your name, email, order number, and you'll be instantly sent the course with the interviews. And then my main website is benazadi.com. You could find my programs, my social media, everything on my website.
Amazing. Yeah. And everybody should go check it out. Ben's done amazing work for many, many years now and continues to do. And I can't wait to read the next book that comes out and continue to learn from you. So thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, Andrew. Keep up the good work, brother.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.